My younger sister, who I raised after our parents died, has been having an affair with my husband of 7 years for the past 3 years, and they've been secretly planning to run away together with my 5-year-old son as soon as my sister gives birth to their baby in 2 months, and I only found out because I saw her ultrasound pic in my husband's wallet with "Can't wait for our family to be complete" written on it. When our parents died in a car accident 10 years ago, I was only 18 and my sister, Mia, was 16. With no close relatives willing to take us in, I made the decision to become her legal guardian. I put my college dreams on hold, found a full-time job, and dedicated myself to ensuring Mia could finish high school and go to college. Everything I did was for her, every extra shift, every missed opportunity, every sacrifice. I wanted to give her the life our parents would have wanted for her. Despite the challenges, we made it work. I eventually took night classes and earned my degree while working during the day. Mia graduated high school with honors and went to college on a partial scholarship. I couldn't have been prouder. When she decided to stay local for college rather than accepting offers from schools across the country, I was secretly relieved. After everything we'd been through, I wasn't ready to be separated from the only family I had left. It was during my final year of college that I met James. He was charming, ambitious, and kind, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. We dated for a year before getting engaged, and Mia seemed genuinely happy for me. She was even my maid of honor at our wedding, giving a tearful speech about how grateful she was for my sacrifices and how much she looked forward to seeing our family grow. James quickly became an integral part of our small family unit, and for the first time since losing our parents, I felt like we were whole again. 3 years into our marriage, we welcomed our son, Ethan. Becoming a mother was the most profound experience of my life. James seemed equally enamored with fatherhood, doting on Ethan and being an involved, loving dad. Mia, who had by then graduated college and started her career as a graphic designer, took on the role of devoted aunt with enthusiasm. She would babysit whenever we needed, bringing Ethan thoughtful gifts and spending hours playing with him. Our little family felt perfect. Looking back now, I can see the signs that something wasn't right, but at the time, I was too trusting, too consumed with motherhood and work to notice the subtle shifts in dynamics. James and Mia had always gotten along well, but somewhere along the line, their relationship changed. There were inside jokes I wasn't part of, lingering glances I chose to ignore, and an increasing number of times when they just happened to be alone together, Mia stopping by to drop something off when she knew I'd be at work, James volunteering to pick her up when her car was in the shop. The truth revealed itself in the most mundane way possible. 2 months ago, James had asked me to grab his wallet from his jacket pocket to pay for the pizza we'd ordered. As I pulled out the wallet, a small square of paper fell out, an ultrasound picture. I picked it up, initially confused. I wasn't pregnant, so why would James have an ultrasound image? Then I turned it over and saw the handwritten note, "Can't wait for our family to be complete. Love you always, M." My hands began to shake as the pieces fell into place. M could only be Mia. The ultrasound was dated just 2 weeks earlier. With a sick feeling in my stomach, I rifled through the wallet, finding a small folded note tucked behind his credit cards. It was a list of apartments in a city 3 hours away, complete with prices and contact information. At the top of the page was a date, exactly 2 months from now. When James came looking for me, wondering what was taking so long with the pizza payment, he found me sitting on the floor, the ultrasound and apartment list laid out in front of me. The look on his face confirmed everything before he could even speak. There was no denial, no attempt to fabricate an explanation. He simply sank down onto the edge of our bed, his head in his hands. What followed was the most devastating conversation of my life. James admitted that he and Mia had been involved for 3 years, since shortly after Ethan was born. What had started as an inappropriate flirtation during late nights when Mia would babysit so James and I could go out had evolved into a full-blown affair. They had been meeting in hotel rooms, at her apartment when I was working, sometimes even in our home when I was away visiting friends. But the betrayal went deeper than just the affair. They had been planning their future together, a future that included my son. James explained, with a coldness that still chills me, that they had intended to wait until Mia gave birth, then announce their relationship and their plans to move away together. They wanted to take Ethan with them, to raise him alongside their new baby as siblings. They had already consulted a lawyer about custody arrangements, researched schools in their target city, and even started setting aside money for the move. I listened in stunned silence, unable to comprehend how the two people I loved most in the world could conspire to destroy me so completely. When I finally found my voice, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since I saw the ultrasound: had they planned the pregnancy? James hesitated before admitting that yes, they had decided to have a baby together months ago. Mia had stopped taking her birth control with the explicit intention of getting pregnant with my husband's child. The calculated nature of their betrayal left me breathless. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a drunken mistake. This was years of deception, of looking me in the eye day after day while systematically undermining everything I thought we had built together. And Mia, the sister I had raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, had participated in this betrayal with full awareness of what it would do to me. I ordered James out of the house that night. He protested initially, concerned about leaving Ethan, but I reminded him coldly that he'd been perfectly willing to tear our son away from his home, his school, and his mother as part of his grand plan with my sister. He left with a small bag of belongings, promising to call the next day to arrange seeing Ethan. I spent the night alternating between sobbing uncontrollably and watching my son sleep, terrified that James might try to take him. The next morning, I called in sick to work and changed all the locks on the house. Then I made the call I had been dreading to Mia. I had expected denials, maybe even tears, but what I got instead was defiance. Mia confirmed everything James had told me, adding that she had been in love with him from the moment they met. She had stood by for years, watching him build a life with me, waiting for her opportunity. When Ethan was born and I was overwhelmed with new motherhood, distracted and exhausted, she had seized her chance. What broke me most was her justification. Mia claimed that she deserved this happiness, that she had spent her entire life in my shadow. While I had been the responsible one, the one who sacrificed and took care of everyone, she had always been the sister of the perfect daughter. She resented the years I had spent raising her, not because I'd done a poor job, but because my sacrifice had created a debt she could never repay. In her twisted logic, taking my husband and my child was her way of finally breaking free from that debt, of establishing her own identity separate from her role as my little sister. In the weeks that followed, my life became almost unrecognizable. James moved into Mia's apartment, coming by the house only to see Ethan under my watchful eye. I hired a lawyer, filed for divorce, and initiated a custody battle that promised to be both expensive and emotionally devastating. My lawyer advised me to document everything: James's admission of the affair, the planned move, any concerning behavior around Ethan. I installed security cameras around my house, saved text messages and emails, and kept a detailed journal of every interaction. The most painful aspect was explaining the situation to Ethan. At 5 years old, he was too young to understand the complexities of what had happened, but old enough to notice that his father no longer lived with us and that his beloved Aunt Mia suddenly wasn't around anymore. I tried to be as honest as possible without burdening him with adult problems, telling him that Daddy and I had decided not to live together anymore but that we both still loved him very much. I couldn't bring myself to explain about the baby, about his father's relationship with his aunt, about the half-sibling he would soon have. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support and expressing their shock and outrage at James and Mia's betrayal. My closest friend, Lena, moved in temporarily to help with Ethan and provide emotional support. My boss, upon learning what had happened, allowed me to work flexible hours and take time off as needed for legal meetings and therapy appointments. I was discovering that while my immediate family had imploded, there was a wider network of people who cared deeply about Ethan and me. James, meanwhile, seemed determined to proceed with the original plan, just with a modified timeline. He filed for joint custody of Ethan and made it clear that he still intended to move with Mia once the baby was born. He argued that Ethan should have the opportunity to grow up with his half-sibling, that separating them would be detrimental to both children. The audacity of this argument, coming from a man who had planned to rip Ethan away from his mother and familiar environment, was staggering. Mia's pregnancy progressed, and with it, her confidence that their plan would succeed despite my awareness of it. She began posting on social media about her excitement to become a mother, sharing ultrasound pictures and nursery preparations without a hint of shame. She never mentioned James directly in these posts, maintaining the pretense that her pregnancy was not connected to the implosion of my marriage, but the timing made the truth obvious to anyone who knew us both. The first court hearing regarding temporary custody arrangements was a surreal experience. Sitting across from James and his lawyer, listening to them argue that despite his infidelity and deception, he was still a loving father who deserved equal time with his son, I felt as though I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. My lawyer presented evidence of the planned move, arguing that James's demonstrated willingness to separate Ethan from his mother and familiar environment showed poor judgment that should be considered in custody decisions. The judge granted me primary physical custody, with James receiving visitation rights for 2 weekends a month and 1 evening a week. It was a temporary arrangement until a more comprehensive custody evaluation could be completed, but it provided some immediate relief. James was also ordered not to remove Ethan from the county without my written permission, addressing my fear that he might try to take our son and disappear. As the weeks passed and the reality of our new situation settled in, I found myself oscillating between devastating grief and cold fury. The life I had carefully built, the family I had struggled to create after losing my parents, had been systematically dismantled by the two people I had trusted most. Every memory was now tainted, every family photograph a record of deception. Had James ever truly loved me, or had I simply been a convenient path to stability until something more exciting came along? Had Mia resented me all along, even as I sacrificed my own opportunities to give her a chance at a normal life? 1 month after discovering the affair, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Mia's roommate from college, Tara. We had met several times over the years but hadn't stayed in touch. Her message was brief but explosive. She had information about James and Mia that I needed to know. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop the following day. Tara arrived looking nervous but determined. After ordering our coffees and finding a quiet corner, she revealed what she had come to tell me. According to Tara, the affair between James and Mia hadn't begun 3 years ago as they claimed. It had started much earlier, before James and I were even married. Tara had walked in on them in Mia's dorm room when we were still engaged. She had been shocked, confused, and unsure what to do with the information. Mia had begged her not to tell me, claiming it was a one-time mistake that would never happen again. James had backed up this story, promising that he truly loved me and had simply made a terrible error in judgment. Tara had reluctantly agreed to keep their secret, a decision she had regretted ever since. She had distanced herself from Mia after graduation, unable to maintain a friendship built on such a significant deception. It was only when she saw Mia's pregnancy announcement on social media and heard through mutual friends about my divorce that she realized the affair had never ended. She felt compelled to tell me the truth, even though it came years too late to prevent the damage that had been done. This new information cast an even darker shadow over the entire history of my relationship with James and my sister. My engagement, my wedding day, the birth of my son, all of these milestone moments had been occurring against a backdrop of betrayal I hadn't even been aware of. The knowledge that Mia had been involved with James even before he became my husband transformed what I had understood as a terrible mistake into something far more sinister, a deliberate, years-long campaign of deception. Armed with this new information, I returned to my lawyer. While the fact that the affair predated our marriage didn't change the legal aspects of our divorce significantly, it did provide additional context for the custody evaluation. It demonstrated a pattern of deception that extended far beyond a recent affair, raising serious questions about James's character and trustworthiness as a co-parent. As my lawyer worked to incorporate this new information into our case, I focused on creating stability for Ethan. I enrolled him in therapy with a child psychologist specializing in family transitions, found a support group for myself, and worked on establishing new routines and traditions for our smaller family unit. I was determined that despite everything that had happened, Ethan would grow up feeling secure, loved, and supported. 7 weeks after discovering the affair, I received an unexpected visit from James's parents. They had been traveling abroad when the news of our separation broke, and had only recently returned to find their family in chaos. They had always been kind to me, welcoming me warmly into their family and doting on Ethan as their only grandchild. I hadn't been sure where their loyalties would lie in the wake of the affair, but I invited them in, wanting to give them a chance to see their grandson regardless of what had happened between James and me. To my surprise, they had come not just to see Ethan but to express their unequivocal support for me. They had spoken with James, heard his version of events, and were appalled by his behavior and choices. His mother, tearfully clutching my hands, assured me that while they would always love their son, they did not condone his actions and would not support his relationship with Mia. They considered me family regardless of the divorce and wanted to maintain their relationship with both Ethan and me. Their support was unexpected and deeply moving. In the midst of so much betrayal, their steadfast loyalty reminded me that family could be defined by love and choice rather than merely by blood or legal ties. They promised to respect my boundaries regarding James and Mia, asking only that I allow them to continue being grandparents to Ethan, a request I readily granted. The conversation with James's parents gave me the strength to do something I had been avoiding, contacting my own parents' closest friends, the couple who had been like an aunt and uncle to Mia and me growing up. I had been embarrassed to tell them what had happened, feeling somehow that I had failed to maintain the family my parents had left behind. But their response mirrored that of James's parents: immediate concern for my well-being, outrage at Mia and James's betrayal, and offers of practical and emotional support. With this expanded support system in place, I felt better equipped to face the next challenge, the impending birth of James and Mia's child. My lawyer had advised me that while the baby's arrival wouldn't directly impact my divorce proceedings, it would likely trigger a re-evaluation of custody arrangements. James was almost certain to request modifications that would allow Ethan to spend time with his half-sibling, potentially including overnight stays at whatever home he established with Mia. The thought of my son spending time in a household with the two people who had betrayed me so completely was almost unbearable. Yet I knew that fighting this arrangement might ultimately harm Ethan more than it protected him. As much as I despised James and Mia for what they had done, they were still Ethan's father and aunt, people he loved and trusted. And the baby, innocent of its parents' sins, would be his half-sibling, a blood relation he had a right to know if he chose to. I decided to be proactive, proposing through my lawyer a custody arrangement that would allow Ethan to develop a relationship with his half-sibling while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. I suggested that initially, James could have additional visitation with Ethan at my home or in neutral locations like parks or child-friendly restaurants. This would allow Ethan to meet and get to know the baby without immediately being thrust into overnight stays in an unfamiliar environment with Mia, whose role in his life would inevitably be confusing and complicated. James reluctantly agreed to this temporary arrangement, though his lawyer made it clear that they would be pushing for more traditional visitation, including overnight stays, once the baby was a few months old. It wasn't ideal, but it gave me time to work with Ethan's therapist on preparing him for these changes and to establish firm boundaries with James and Mia about how they would explain their relationship to my son. As Mia's due date approached, the reality of the situation began to sink in more deeply. Soon there would be a child in the world who was both my son's half-sibling and my sister's child with my husband. The family tree had become so tangled, so broken, that I couldn't imagine how we would ever explain it to the children involved in a way that didn't cause confusion and pain. I found myself lying awake at night, imagining future scenarios, birthday parties where we would all have to pretend civility for the children's sake, school events where I might have to sit near the couple who had betrayed me, awkward exchanges during holiday handoffs, the inevitable questions from Ethan as he grew older and began to understand the complicated circumstances of his family. The road ahead seemed impossibly difficult, a minefield of emotional triggers and painful reminders that I would have to navigate for years to come. 2 weeks before Mia's due date, I received a call from James asking if we could meet to discuss some changes to his plans. Wary but curious, I agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe during Ethan's school hours. James arrived looking tired and tense, a sharp contrast to the confident, almost arrogant demeanor he had displayed since moving out. He ordered coffee but barely touched it, instead fidgeting with his napkin as he struggled to find the right words. Finally, he told me that things with Mia had become complicated. The fantasy of their relationship had begun to crumble under the weight of reality. Living together, preparing for a baby, and dealing with the aftermath of their choices had revealed fundamental compatibility issues they had overlooked during the excitement of their affair. They argued constantly about everything from finances to parenting approaches to how to handle the ongoing legal proceedings with me. Most significantly, James admitted that he was having serious doubts about the planned move to a new city. The custody arrangement meant he would either have to leave Ethan behind or fight a costly and potentially futile legal battle to take him along. The job opportunity he had lined up wasn't as promising as he had initially believed. The apartment they had chosen was smaller than expected and in a neighborhood with mediocre schools. The dream of a fresh start was giving way to the sobering reality of rebuilding a life from scratch, with a newborn baby, in an unfamiliar place, under the cloud of scandal they had created. I listened to James's litany of concerns with a detached curiosity, feeling neither sympathy for his predicament nor satisfaction his evident unhappiness. When he finished speaking, I asked him directly what he wanted from me. His response was halting, uncertain, he wasn't sure. He wasn't asking to reconcile, too much had been broken for that, but he was reconsidering the path forward, particularly regarding Ethan. I told him plainly that I had no interest in making his life easier or helping him navigate the consequences of his choices. My only concern was Ethan's well-being. If James was rethinking the move, that was a positive development for our son's stability, but it didn't change the fundamental breach of trust that had occurred. We would continue with the divorce and custody proceedings as planned, making adjustments only as necessary to protect Ethan's interests. James left looking defeated, a far cry from the confident man who had once told me he and Mia were destined to be together. I felt no triumph in his evident distress, only a weary resignation that this was merely the next phase in an ongoing saga that would continue to unfold in unexpected ways for years to come. 3 days later, Mia went into labor a week ahead of schedule. I learned about it not from either of the principals involved but from James's mother, who called to let me know that James would need to reschedule his visitation with Ethan. She shared that according to James, the birth had been difficult but mother and baby, a girl, were doing well. I thanked her for the information and hung up, feeling a complex swirl of emotions I couldn't quite name. A week later, a large envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a formal announcement of the birth of Mia and James's daughter, along with a typed letter from my sister. The letter was neither apologetic nor confrontational, but rather matter-of-fact. Mia explained that she and James had decided not to proceed with the planned move, at least for the foreseeable future. They would be staying in our current city, living separately while co-parenting their daughter. She acknowledged that our relationship was likely beyond repair but expressed hope that in time, for the children's sake, we might find a way to establish a civil coexistence. The announcement felt bizarrely formal coming from my own sister, as though we were distant acquaintances rather than people who had once shared everything. The careful wording of the letter suggested it had been drafted with legal advice, perhaps to establish a paper trail of attempted reconciliation that could be referenced in future custody discussions. I filed it away with a growing collection of documentation related to the divorce and custody proceedings, another piece in the paper trail of my disintegrated family. As I write this, 2 months have passed since that ultrasound fell from James's wallet and shattered the illusion of my perfect family. The divorce proceedings continue, complicated but progressing. The custody evaluation is underway, with professionals interviewing everyone involved, observing interactions, and assessing what arrangement will best serve Ethan's needs. James sees Ethan according to the temporary schedule established by the court, and I'm learning to release my son into his father's care without showing the anxiety I feel each time. Mia and I have had no direct contact since her letter. James has sent a few photos of the baby, my niece technically, though I struggle to think of her that way, with vague suggestions that perhaps Ethan might meet his half-sister soon. I've neither agreed nor refused, telling James that I'm following the advice of Ethan's therapist regarding the timing and manner of that introduction. I'm still angry. I still feel betrayed beyond words. There are days when grief overwhelms me, when I mourn not just the loss of my marriage but the loss of my sister, my only blood relative, the person who was supposed to be my partner in navigating life after our parents' death. There are moments when I look at Ethan and see echoes of James, and my heart breaks anew thinking about the intact family he deserved to have. But alongside these difficult emotions, I'm beginning to find a fragile sense of hope. Ethan is resilient, adjusting to our new normal with the adaptability of childhood. My support network has proven stronger than I could have imagined. I'm advancing in my career, finding purpose in work that had sometimes taken a backseat to family obligations. I'm rediscovering aspects of myself that had been subsumed in my roles as wife, mother, and surrogate parent to Mia. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if James and Mia's relationship will last or crumble under the weight of what they've done. I don't know how Ethan will process the complicated truth of his family as he grows older. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at my sister without feeling the knife twist of her betrayal, or if I'll ever trust deeply enough to build a new relationship with someone else. What I do know is that I survived the unimaginable destruction of my family at the hands of those I trusted most. I protected my son from the worst of the fallout. I maintained my dignity in the face of humiliation. I built a new support system from the ashes of what was lost. And perhaps most importantly, I discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed, a resilience forged in the fire of betrayal that will carry me forward, whatever challenges lie ahead. Family isn't always what we expect it to be. Sometimes it breaks apart in ways we could never anticipate. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. But family can also be rebuilt, redefined, expanded beyond blood ties to include those who prove their loyalty through actions rather than mere relation. That's the family I'm building now, one based on choice, respect, and genuine love rather than obligation or biology. And in that rebuilding, painful as it may be, I'm finding a way forward for myself and for my son.